Behind the Shades.
My name's Lynn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. I have a podcast show, as Terrain mentioned, which is called Hearts Entwined. And I do all things love, dating, relationships, sex education. And a little bit about me. My story is quite a harrowing one. I went through a couple of really serious assaults in my teens, and I'm a survivor of what you can probably guess those assaults might be. And I turned my life around, after going through quite traumatic events. I want people to know that you can turn your life around and you don't have to be a victim. You can be that survivor and thriver of whatever experience you've been through.
I know there's so many people that have struggled with the different types of assaults, and there's many, right? You have the physical, you have the emotional, you have the verbal, you have the spiritual, you have the sexual, you have all these different types. And although they may show up differently in our day-to-day life, they still impact us quite a bit. And I know there's many people out there who maybe haven't been able to reconcile it, and there's probably some people out there who they just bury it, right? I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna put it in the farthest part of my closet where that dirty shirt is that I hated because my grandmother got it for me and I was just being nice when I said, I like it. I really, really like it. So for you, Lynn, you shared what you went through and you touched on it, but what ultimately got you started in wanting to have these types of conversations with others?
I think for me, it was my own. I've got two daughters, and at the time, I think I was around 42. So this is going, way into the future, past the time. I mean, my first experience of, and this is serious sexual assault, the very worst, was 15, and then again 18 with two different guys, two different occasions. And I think for me, when I saw my oldest daughter was about 11, 12 at the time, going through puberty, I think that was a wake-up call for me that I needed to do something constructive in terms of my own healing that I hadn't embarked on, because I wanted to be able to tell my daughters as well as my husband at the time that this is what's happened to me in the past, and I hadn't up until that point told anybody.
What are some of the steps that you decided to ultimately take to one, address it and work on yourself, as well as you mentioned, to be in a better position for your own children?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, my experience wasn't great in the UK. I'm from the UK, but I live in Spain at the moment. So I called, what I would think is the main agency and authority that I thought would be able to help me, and that was in the UK Rape Crisis. And they did arrange to speak to me fairly quickly, and I did go and speak to a counsellor. And do you know what? At the end of the conversation, she said to me, "Well, I'm sorry, Lynn." She says, "For any future counselling, there's going to have there's an actual, I think she says 12 to 18 months waiting list." And I was like, "What?" It's took me like whatever it was, 25 years to get to this point where I've reached out, and you're telling me now that I've gained the courage to reach out, that I'm going to now have to wait another 12 to 18 months before I get any ongoing counseling. It was ridiculous, honestly.
That is a long time. And I wonder how many people have gone through something similar where they're looking for help and the time is so long. Like I look at it like, if Lynn, if you came to me and you said, Terrain, I need your strength, I need your guidance. I say, Lynn, of course I can help you in 8 months. Right? You'd be shocked, wouldn't you be?
I absolutely was. And do you know what? In those days, I mean, going back to about 2002 here, um, it was snail mail, so they sent you a letter in the post when they got the availability. And do you know what? At that time, because I'd already found the courage to speak to my now ex-husband about it, and my two daughters. I thought that was it. That was me. That I was fixed. and I actually didn't go for any further ongoing counselling. I just said give it to somebody else, that appointment, or that space. And yeah, probably not the wisest decision.
Especially when you look at your own children. You're very young when you went through it. You mentioned that you're 15, and so many children or young adults, 15, 16, 17, right? They go through so many adverse childhood experiences, and it leads to so many different types of adult issues such as anxiety, depression, um, and maybe to a degree like isolation, because if it's unresolved, you may look at groups of people that way, right? Or a man assaulted me, or all men this way, a woman treated me this way, or all women this way. And I think as you bring children into this world, it could be something along the lines, there wasn't someone there to protect me in the way that I wanted to be protected. So now I want to make sure that my children are or protected. You could be a little bit overbearing, overprotective. You can view the world in general now as a very toxic environment. Did you notice that some of what you're going through began to impact the way that you were as a parent towards your own children?
I think I was protective. I don't think I was overprotective. And fortunately, I've never known what it's like to be depressed, even, and this might sound like a contradiction, because even, after the second event, I felt suicidal. But even, going as far as, because I was a veterinary nurse at that time, going to the drug cabinet where I knew there would be a drug that would kill me instantly, because I lived in this, the premises, the vet skevers, the apartment, the nurses above the surgery. So I knew where to go and get this drug, and I knew how it worked and how quickly it would kill me. And I even got as far as doing that. But even though I felt suicidal, I wouldn't say I ever sunk into any depression. Now I know that's not the case for a lot of women that have been through that sort of trauma, but I've always been fortunately a quite a positive mindset. And in the end I just talked myself out of it and couldn't go through with it, because I was thinking about my younger brother at the time, and couldn't do it to him, basically. But yeah, it's interesting. I feel for me, so that wasn't an issue. I don't think they had problems seeing me in any sort of down state, but I know traumatically inside my body I was suppressing stuff, so that I always had weight issues, yo-yoing up and down the scales, for example. So it showed up in my body more, and I realized, after going down more of a personal development route rather than a counseling or therapy route, that I've been living most of my adult life on high alert and not even realizing it. I was super, super hypersensitive to energy, and picking up on who I felt I could trust and who I couldn't, especially men.
As you look back, and you've grown obviously so much since, right? You have this podcast, you have this way of helping so many other people. When you look back and you're reflective, are you like, how proud are you to be making these changes, not only to your life but the lives of others?
Super proud, because you know what? I think a lot of us get stuck, and it's so easy to label ourselves, I am a victim and my perpetrator has made me a victim, and therefore I'm going to live as a victim for the rest of my life because this is what they did to me. Rather than, if you're in touch with somebody that's been through that experience and they've overcome it, they will actually teach the opposite of that, in that, you know what? My belief is that I'm a survivor thriver. My belief is that I've got the power. No perpetrator or perpetrators are going to take the power of me living a successful life away from me. I won't give them that power to do that to me. And why would you? And I trust, even though my perpetrators didn't go through the official legal system and the courts, that there's a higher power. I mean, I'm not a religious person, I never have been, but I do believe in a higher power. And, so I trust the universe, and I trust the karma that the universe will dish out, and that my perpetrators will experience justice at the hands of the universe dishing that out in whatever way they deem fit. So I can live in my power and not have to worry about that.
There are times in my life where I look back where someone has done something that I didn't like, that just absolutely pissed me off, Lynn. And sometimes it can bring you to a dark place, right? Like, I can wake up and be like, I want to get my big, mighty hands around their skinny little neck and just cause them, right, all types of damage. But then I take a step back and I say, the pain that I caused, is it just for that pain to be caused back to them? And there's many times where I can't say yes. Logically, right? If I separate the emotions, now what you went through is horrific, and what many other people continue to go through is horrific. But I think what I was able to discover is once I started to do good things and good deeds, that helped me to resolve whatever issues that I was going with in handling the stress and the pain and the trauma that I was going through. In your adult years now, Lynn, and you have your podcast, do you pull from some of the pain that you've gone through to motivate you to hear some of these stories and share some of your insights?
Absolutely, yes. And I trust that I'm given, spiritual guidance, if you like, as well, and that I'm speaking whatever wisdom needs to be shared to my audience, be it face to face or via something like this. So I trust in having those empowering beliefs, if you like. So if you are believing, that you are a victim and you're going to be living in fear and worry and doubt all your life, then obviously that's what you're going to be focused on, and that's what you will no doubt attract and experience. And I know that, your beliefs play a huge part in that. And I feel it's important to understand that a belief is neither true, right, or real. You just have to have your beliefs in place that's going to serve you and be of value to you and enhance your life. So if you find that you have got negative beliefs, it is important to examine those and question those, to get rid of those and think about what beliefs can I now take on board that is and does feel okay to me. It might not be absolutely concrete right this minute, but if you start by looking at what beliefs you've got that may be disempowering you, and start looking instead and thinking, you know what, I'm not going to allow any perpetrators to impact my life negatively going forward. I'm going to be taking my power back, and I'm just going to trust the universe is going to sort out whatever punishment or justice is needed in terms of those perpetrators. And I'm just going to focus on having a great life, and that's going to be my biggest achievement. And if you want to call it revenge, call it revenge, and that's the way I live and teach.
Now, from one podcaster to another, and we deal with so many traumatic situations from our guests, especially when it comes to like relationships in the three different forms, right? We have the professional, we have the personal, we have the romantic. What are some of the stories or some of the guests that you've had on where you're like, okay, that actually does happen because you didn't know someone went through it, but today you met someone that actually went through it? How was that experience?
I think you tend to attract the people that you need to attract, to be quite honest, Terrain. I tend to attract a lot of women that have been through not necessarily the same exact scenarios as what I've been through, but certainly similar in terms of assaults and abuse and things like that. And quite often they are my guests as well that have been through those same things. So I think we attract our own soul tribe, so to speak.
I will agree. I look back at some of the guests that I have, and A lot of them are people trying to figure out parenthood. Like, I don't have any children, right? And I remember growing up, and you probably told this the same thing. Train, you go to graduate, find yourself a wife, have 2.5 kids. Don't forget the dog and the white picket fence. Here I am in my 30s. I have the white picket fence and I have the dog, but I don't have the children or the wife. So it's kind of funny how I continue to interview these people. It's like the universe saying, "Go get your kids right now." Like every guest that I have. And one thing that I did learn early on in my podcasting career is that the world is so much bigger than you, meaning that you can go through something, your friends could go through something, but then someone knocks on your podcast door and says, "Hey, I have 3 wives. I have 3 husbands. I'm polyamorous," which I'm like, I didn't know about that type of lifestyle. Tell me more. Or you'll have someone that is like a step parent and you'll learn the dynamics of that world. What is a type of guest that you had that really stood out in your mind, and why did it do so?
Well, you actually just hit the nail on the head. I suppose I've had guests that have because I've got no taboo subjects, when it comes to love, dating, relationships, and sex education, and I've got a very open mind. Now, for me, polyamory, for example, relationships aren't for me personally. I like to be in a monogamous relationships, but I do understand that my audience might, or some of my audience might at least have an interest. So I have had people like that. I've had people that have been into kinky stuff. I've had people that have had sex shops talking about marital aids. So yeah, and BDSM and all sorts really that aren't necessarily something that I want to experiment with, but I think, okay, let's do an episode around it because, for whatever reason, it might just resonate with a certain percentage of my audience, and I'm open to being open-minded around those sorts of topics.
BDSM as in like whips and chains?
Yeah.
Oh Lord. I think I'll drop dead on that podcast episode. Oh my goodness. I'm at the age, I'm going to share this, Lynn, because I like you and, we're friends. I'm at the point where my reputation is already set. I'm lay down. Okay, let's go. In my 20s, I was probably doing backflips and somersaults and going window to wallpaper. But whips and chains. Wow, how was that conversation?
Interesting. I've had a few of those conversations actually. And them talking about it, being the dominant or submissive and what those roles are. And I find it interesting. I just find it interesting to talk about. But as I say, I've got no personal interest in it myself. It's just that, I don't want to be constrained to just being. I like to be a little bit controversial sometimes, I suppose, what I'm trying to say as well. And there's entertainment value in it as well as knowledge. Some people might not know that these things exist outside of what they've experienced, and might think, oh, actually, I might find that interested to explore. So who knows?
So like interested from a distance, right? Not like interested, ooh, tell me more. And you get your notepad and you're making notes.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm just a curious person. I just like to learn. Whether I am interested in actually dabbling in that sort of stuff or not. I just like to know and understand things and what I'm into the psychology as well. What motivates people to engage in these sort of behaviors?
Because you have that conversation, you have those types of conversation, as you mentioned earlier, like you help people from a sexuality standpoint as well as romantic. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I could understand like why you would touch on those broad subjects because despite popular belief, it is very important to be on the same page when it comes to that, because your wants, Lynn, may be different than mine, and your expectations may be different than mine as well. How do you help people have those types of conversations to make sure that they're, for the most part, on the same page when it comes to the interactions in a relationship?
I think it's about gaining trust with your client, really. I think just by sharing your own personal experiences, as well as coming across warm and open, helps somebody open up them back to you, and then you can find out, because they have got to this point where they know, they like, and they trust you to be more fully open in what else they might want to share about what interests them when it comes to sex, for example.
How difficult is that conversation to have for people? Because for me, it seems like it, I don't know, what if they kind of look at me funny? Like how difficult is it?
I don't suppose it is difficult, because for me, it might be a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe it is, or maybe it isn't, or maybe that's just your perception. But I think for me, because I'm a woman and I'm usually speaking to another woman, there's no suggestion that there could be any ulterior motive as to why I'm asking them a question that might, provoke an uncomfortable answer, or something that they think is quite private and, sexually explicit, for example.
One of my friends, that's a good point, because one of my friends, he's a man, and he used to anytime he would try to have the conversation about sex, he was so awkward about it. And I say awkward not necessarily in his response, but the way he'll ask it. So I'll give you an example. He'll say something on the lines, "So Lynn, this weekend, are your legs going to be in the air?" And it's like, what do you mean? So, because there's better ways to ask, right? And then he'll like have this like laugh, like, those belly laughs where it's like, ha 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 ha. Like he'll have one of
Yeah.
those sinister super villain types of laughs, right?
Some guys have
What
got no filter, have they? And they'd say it in what could be perceived as in an appropriate way.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think there has to be some discreetness, right? Where you, as you mentioned, you ask it and it has to come across as you not being invasive, or you're trying to use the information for any malicious intent. So how do you walk that line that's maybe easier when the person is of the same sex, but let's say if they're of the opposite sex, like a woman to a man or a man to a woman? How can we walk that line?
Yeah, I think it's just being you authentically yourself. I think a lot of people grow up, trying to compare them, not trying, but actually doing comparisons of themselves against other people, and trying to be somebody they're not. And what makes me sad today is I see, a lot of young women, especially, using filters, cosmetic surgeries, invasive procedures, yeah, and things like that. And I'm heartbroken, because why aren't they comfortable being who they are, and feeling that they're good enough to be accepted for who they are, just as they are, the way they look, especially, is down, I suppose, to media more than anything, sort of being poor role models for how we view others and how we should view ourselves, which, I feel that the money would be far better spent on, working with somebody around their mental health, so they don't feel the need to do that. They don't need the feel to, the need to wear a mask, or try to present themselves as somebody who they're not. And I think if you come across as authentic, people open up to you more, even when you're not inviting them to. I have people really open up to me, and I've not invited that conversation. They've just suddenly, and I thought, oh, wasn't expecting that, because they felt so comfortable enough to do so.
Some of the biggest forms of insecurities are what you just mentioned, right? And they may impact men and women differently. So, for example, appearance, looks. maybe impacting women more so than men. Money and career may impact men more so than women. Weight is another one that's big. So I can see why people will present themselves online in a way that is different than reality, because the online world, you can be in many cases anything you want, right? I can get on this microphone, Lynn, and I can say that I am better looking than Brad Pitt. I have more money than Brad Pitt,
You
right?
are,
And I
obviously.
am, absolutely, right? And the funny thing about that is, as long as the content matches that narrative, I can fool a lot of people, right? Because we don't know the life story or the history of many of the people that we may engage with online. Like, you and I know each other quite well enough to know what we are and what we aren't. But outside of meeting someone for once or twice and not having those types of conversation, is basically just what they put out. And I think that's why you have so many issues when it comes to online dating, because the person that you interacted with on the computer screen may be different than the person you interact in person. And then all of a sudden they're like, I have nothing to say. They
Mm.
freeze up, right? And it is heartbreaking, as you mentioned, that there's so many young people, younger than us, of course, right? Young girls, young boys, who are so wrapped up in designing what I call their avatar online, because it's like this caricature of themselves, because maybe who they really are isn't good enough to them. So therefore, why would it be good enough to anyone else? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel it's so sad, like you just mentioned, that the majority of people, we grow up thinking we're not enough, we're not worthy, and if we're not enough, and we don't, and if we're not conscious that we are not loving ourselves, but I think that the root of it is that we're not, and then why would other people, and that's the energy we're putting out. We're putting out the energy of, I don't feel enough, I don't feel worthy, I don't love myself. Um, and then that's what they're attracting into their lives, that gets reinforced, because it comes back to the inner work. It comes back to, what energy are you exuding? It's not outside of you, that, and in terms of people, that 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 if you look at people as mirrors, for what energy you're putting out there, you'll probably realize that you need to do some inner work on yourself, and show yourself the love that you want from other people. Because by showing yourself the love that you want from other people, and being comfortable in your own skin, is what's going to attract you to that healthier partner in life, man, woman, or whoever.
That is such a big, big step to take, to learn to love yourself and then present that new you to other people to be loved the same way. What do you think is preventing us from obtaining the type of love that we are looking for in our relationships?
I think we've just been modeled to, again, by caregivers, parents, teachers, to look outside of ourselves for external validation, when the opposite should be taught. Look within, and be taught to believe in yourself and love yourself for who you are, and enjoy that person who is authentically who you are, and know that other people will love you for who you are, because you are exuding the energy of loving yourself. And I don't obviously mean from an arrogance point of view, like I'm the man. But one phrase that stuck with me on my life journey was that, to the point where you're just south of arrogant. I like that. Just south of arrogant. Just, you know, um, And there's lots, I mean, if you don't know where to start with this, obviously there's lots of people, Terrain, myself, other coaches, trainers, therapists, whoever you'd like to work with, that know how to bring that out in somebody, you know, and give you the exercises so that if you think, oh, your immediate reaction is, there's no way I could ever learn to love myself, even though I'm actually now acknowledging that perhaps I don't. And that's why I've not been having healthy relationships, because I've been exuding the fact that I don't love myself. I don't feel I'm deserving. I don't feel as I'm worthy, and therefore I'm attracting these relationships that reinforce just those things.
How are some of the ways that you were able to love yourself, maybe back in your younger years and now?
I don't think, to be honest, I have to put my hand up and say I was one of those people that didn't love myself until I, you know, as I said, invested in myself and started to do some personal development and personal growth with other coaches. And you know, I wasn't, you know, you don't know what you don't know until you do. So it was one of those situations. You don't know that you're beating up on yourself. You don't know that you've got a lack of self-love until you start being introduced to workshops or seminars or coaches that actually teach you this stuff, and then you realize, oh my God. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. We've all been there, you know, myself massively included. So it's not about beating yourself up once you do start to know, but it's then learning to catch yourself, you know, and be more aware of your thoughts that you're thinking, the words that you're saying, so that if you are, you know, doing yourself down and it is coming from a place of fear, lack, worry, doubt, then just thinking to yourself, hang on a minute, I've just caught that, you know, and how can I reframe this situation or this event and turn it into something that I can learn from and take some sort of positive around.
I wonder, with the rise of coaches and therapists and the need for them, because we all need someone to talk to. Um, if I look at like our parents' generation, the coach, the mentor was that elder person in the community. It was someone
Yeah,
who was right, who was a little bit older, who's a little bit wiser, who been there and done that, for lack of a better phrase. And now I'm busy, you're busy, we're all busy. And it's like we don't have the time to even check in with our friends, right? To make sure that they're okay. Whereas in past generations, that was always a thing. It was always okay. Let's get together. Let's have a good time. It's just the five of us, the four of us, whomever. Once that started to break down, I strongly believe that that's where the rise of people like you and I and many others who are saying, okay, let's turn around the microphone and give you the opportunity to voice what you're going through. Let's hold up the mirror and show you how beautiful you can be. Is that how you view the work that you're doing with your clients as well as many others?
yeah, absolutely. It's just a shame, you know. I grew up in you know, the 60s, and I was born in 1960, so I'm 63 now. So, you know, in those days, in the UK at least, you know, a lot of children were seen and not heard, you know, and I was brought up in a very strict, disciplined family, you know, and my mum and dad had a very volatile relationship as well. So literally, you know, we were given corporal punishment, me and my brother, you know, we got the cane, we got the slipper, we got the belt, you know, as punishments. You'd be done for that these days. You know, you'd be locked up as parents these days if you're doing that to your children. So and we thought that was normal, and we thought it never did us any harm. But you know what, Terrain, it did.
It definitely did. And I grew up in that era as well, and I didn't get it really much that often. If I look back on it, and neither did others in my family. But it was something, but the threat of it was always there, and it did happen. And something that was interesting that I found is when I spoke to, I don't know if you've done this, but when I spoke to my parents about it, it wasn't something they enjoyed doing, but it felt like they didn't know any better.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
right? And that's the part that I always found strange because it goes back to that old saying, do unto others as you'd want them to do unto you. And if you and I got into an argument and you slap me, would you want to be slapped back? The answer probably would be no, right? Unless you're into this BDSM. And we bring out the whips and the chains, and she's like, go train more, more, more. Right? Right? But it is scary to see how far we will go when we're inflicting onto others and it's one-sided.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yes.
how do you find that in the relationships, not only, let's say, from the parents and the children, but let's say between two people who are in a romantic relationship and they're inflicting and inflicting trauma and harm to someone else, knowing they wouldn't want it to them be done back to them, but it's so one-sided.
Yeah, and I think we each have our own part to play in that situation. You know, if you're the, and I put this in inverted commas, the victim that's being assaulted, for example, or verbally, or whether that's verbally or physically, then you, by merely not having boundaries in place and having the strength to walk away from that and allowing that behavior to be repeated within that relationship, are sending the message that it's okay. So we each have to take our own responsibility in a relationship for what is happening. And I know that's probably difficult for some people to hear, especially if they have been in or are currently in a relationship where they're being physically assaulted or even verbally assaulted. That's not what we consider it to be acceptable behavior, nor would we want to give it to the other person necessarily, because that's not who we are. But by merely not being educated about having boundaries, about what you're willing to accept, and by not going through the work that teaches you how to love yourself and know that you're worth more than that, you deserve better than that, by staying in that relationship, you're allowing and more or less sending the message to your partner that you condone this behavior. So that's your part and your responsibility. You might say, well, I'm the victim in this situation. Well, no, you're not. You do have power, you're just not using it, or you've not been taught how to use it.
Why do you think that is a difficult conclusion or revelation for people to come to?
Again, it's about education, isn't it? It's about not knowing this information and just accepting it as being the norm. And quite often we don't walk away from it, even if it's unhealthy. And do you know why we don't walk away from it? Because it's familiar to us. It feels comfortable, even though it's unhealthy and horrible. It feels comfortable. It feels familiar because that's all we've ever known. And your mind plays tricks and tells you that things can't be different, but they can. You have the power. You just got to challenge that mind and say there is an alternative to this. It's just that it might push you out your comfort zone, and people, rather than be pushed out their comfort zone and explore things that they've not tried before, they stay in what is familiar, even though it's unhealthy.
That's a great point, and that made me think of someone who was in a relationship that they didn't enjoy. And when he looked at it, he said that I don't enjoy being in this relationship. It's toxic, it's causing me grief, it's causing me all these types of different pains. But every night I know that when I go home and when I go into my bed, someone is there. It became familiar to him. And there's another example I have where there's a woman that was telling me that if I have to go out there and potentially find someone better, there's going to be periods of time where I'm alone, where I don't have someone to come home to. So I rather stay with this person who is mistreating me because I know that the home is filled, even though the home may be filled with toxicity. It's better than me being alone. And some people actually will compromise themselves in that fashion. And that is truly heartbreaking because, as you mentioned, It's familiar, it's all they know, but all they know is chaos. Right, Lynn?
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with Anthony Robbins and his 6 human needs, but he says we will compromise our needs. Sorry, we will compromise our morals and values, I should say, to get our needs met. And our needs are the need for certainty, variety, significance, and love and connection. So we usually got out of those four, two main ones that we always want to be met at a high level, and we'll even accept them being met at a high level, even if it's an unhealthy way of getting it met. So then quite often in these situations, a person's highest need is that need for certainty. As I spoke about before, that familiarity, what feels normal to them, will stop them from changing the situation, because they're getting that need met, even though it's unhealthy. And they'll, as I say, that it might go against all their morals and values, but they'll do it and stay there because it's getting that need met.